Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Raposo. Today, my guest is Christopher Lott. He is the senior content writer at Staymates, and today's topic is on the editorial strategy behind great content. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's going to be a good one. I'm so glad you joined us. You're doing great work at Staymates. I'm here behind the scenes, see you present at company meetings, and I thought the knowledge that you share at those meetings are good enough to share with the audience and the world. So let's do this. So at Staymates, you work with clients that produce an enormous amount of expertise and research content. From your perspective, what separates content people actually engage with from the content that just gets published and forgotten?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really the only question, right, Chris? And the only thing that separates great content from good content is whether it connects with the audience, right? Mm-hmm. So, and the only way content connects with the audience is when it knows its audience. This is something that we repeat all the time in our work. Know your audience, know your audience, know your audience. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways to do that. Data is a big one. You can build those marketing personas. Those are always helpful. But the bottom line is you've got to know who you're talking to. Once you know who you're talking to, you're halfway there, because then you can start to tell the stories that connect with them. Once you know who they are, right? You can start to talk about what are the passions that really move students. What are the discoveries that fuel faculty scholarship? What are the outcomes that make alumni proud? Those are all the stories that can connect once you know who your audience is. The mechanics of how you tell those stories matter. Right, you can't tell a story about that's targeted for an alumni audience with a student-centric platform, right? I'm not going to put that story on TikTok first, but ultimately, it's just a matter of matching up who you're talking to with what they want to hear about. That's when you need to connect.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we all learn about that in journalism school, know your audience, but it's particularly when you work with a new client, let's say it's a healthcare organization or a higher ed institution, do they give you the insights like, this is who we want to talk to, or how do you come about to that realization? They probably tell you, but I just want to know it for the audiences.
That's the best case scenario, right? That the client that we're working with has done the background research and they know who we're talking to. If they haven't, then sometimes it's a little bit of alchemy. It's a little bit of editorial experience can help with that. But data and analytics are number one in our business. So if you can get that data and really start to understand and build out those personas, that's obviously the best way to go.
Yes, and then you have to have the subject matter experts to talk to that particular audience. Now, higher ed institutions are full of brilliant faculty, researchers, and subject matter experts, but many of those best stories never really get to the public. Why do you think that happens?
Yeah, it's really true, Chris. It's a shame, and more often than not in our business, it's because those institutions are telling the stories from the wrong point of view. Think about like Little Red Riding Hood, the classic fairy tale. It's an interesting story if we hear it from the perspective of the big bad wolf. But if our audience is little kids, they're not going to connect with it, right? Because they've never been a big bad wolf.
Yeah.
If we're writing big bad wolves, then we're going to tell a big bad wolf story. So, if you have a faculty member or a researcher who has done good work and they're focused on getting some attention for that, that's great. That's partway there. But what we do is we really help to shift that lens a little bit and change the perspective and say, how can we tell this story in a way that the audience cares about? What is it about this story that the audience cares about? What's in there that's going to enable them to connect with this maybe high level, say, research or scholarship or offering that we want them to learn about? So if you think about the Little Red Riding Hood again, one of the things that lots of little kids know about is going to grandma's house. They've gone over the river and through the woods, maybe not with a picnic basket, but they've gotten in the minivan and they've gone to visit grandma and grandpa. So they're in, right? That's the journey. The hero's journey is to go to visit grandma. So, not to be a wolf. So once they're in, you're telling that same story, but from a perspective that they can identify with. You're in, and once you've done that, then as I know Chris, it's all about how you can remix and reuse that story in different venues, different avenues, because we know that even for reporters, a press release isn't enough to get attention. You've got to really show them the value for their audience too.
Yeah. I love that analogy of the Red Riding Hood because it makes a lot of sense when a researcher puts out a research paper, which is usually written for other academics in a way that they understand and they appreciate. But if you wanted to translate it to the public and simplify it, you have to have a different angle and put yourself in the shoes of the audience there in the general public that don't have those advanced degrees and the subject matter expertise. So it makes a lot of sense, man. So but when you're trying to decide what topics to focus on, how do you balance what the institution wants to talk about with what the audiences are genuinely interested in reading and learning about?
That's the $1 million question, sometimes literally. And the answer is it's a balancing act because, at Staymates, our clients have priorities. They need to make their budget goals, right? They need to enroll more nursing students, or they need to increase the volume of knee replacements that they're doing in the orthopedic clinic. So the question for us then becomes, what's the story that can help achieve that goal? We recognize that your goal is more nursing students, but a story about how you need more nursing students isn't going to get you more nursing students. So instead, my knee jerk would be, hey, do you have a nursing alum who's had a distinguished career, right? And they tell the story about how that success began at your institution, began in the classroom with Professor Smith, and that preparation that leads to those outcomes, right? So then you're demonstrating, you're telling, show not tell. It's another one of those little axioms, right? So you're showing the outcome, not telling them that they're going to get the outcome. And in that way, you can help get people into your nursing fund. My job, my role is to identify the story that's going to move the audience to deliver the client's goal, whether that's nursing students or knee replacements or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever come across a situation where there was that friction point where you, with your experience, knew that a particular way of telling us a certain story would not land, and you gave the advice, or your superior gave the advice to the client and pushed a little bit back to, tell them, hey, you may want to look at this a different way?
Yeah, for sure. It is, with our clients, we have a great working relationship, and those are conversations that we have, maybe not all the time, but often. If a client pitches us a certain framing for a story and we're really concerned that it might not work out. For instance, if you talk about knee replacements, right? If somebody wanted to write a story about, what is a knee replacement? Why do you get your knee replaced? What's it like? That's all valuable information, but it's not a story. Maybe it's a content page, it's a web page. There are lots of places for that information. That's not gonna, when you talk about a story that's not gonna land, that's not it. So we've got to find a way to say, okay, who are the people who need knee replacements, right? Okay, let's say they're white men over age 50. Okay, what do white men over age 50 care about? Okay, now I want to write a story about golf. Right? About how you get your knee replaced to get back on the golf course. or here's somebody who got his knee replaced and was able to get back to doing what he loved. That's what resonates. So how does that conversation go? Sometimes it goes great, and sometimes they say, nope, just do what I want to do. And, we work for the client, so that's what we do. But we're certainly going to give them the advice.
And that advice is well received most of the time. Because if I do client calls, I get that all the time. Like, what I really appreciate about StayMates is that they're not just order takers, but they're a trusted partner, an extension of our team, who actually tells us, the way we should operate. Now, obviously, like you said, in the end, it's the client's decision, but at least you did your part that you're paid for, and you're going above and beyond what's been asked for you, and you're not just an order taker, but then a professional who can execute, but also give advice. So you spend a lot of time interviewing experts and translating complex ideas into content everyday audiences can understand. What have you learned personally about asking better questions and getting people to explain their work in a relatable way?
It's, for me, it is all about having a conversation, not an interrogation. The best interviews, and you're well aware of this, Chris, do have that sort of back and forth. I'm there with the goal of extracting the information I need to make a piece of content, but there are lots of other goals that go along, and goals that I need to accomplish on the way to get there, right? So, obviously, listening is one of the most important interviewing skills, but I always start an interview by talking. I tell them about me. I tell them where I'm coming from. I tell them about my background. I tell them about our process. And that's all in an effort to give them a minute, to take a breath, to ease in. Most of the folks I talk to don't have these kind of conversations day to day. They aren't interviewed. They're out there working with students or patients. They're saving lives. And so giving them a minute, I can think of more than one instance when I've needed to talk to a doctor and he or she has shown up for the interview in surgical scrubs, sometimes bloody, or they've clearly just whisked into their office from a patient exam room. So giving them a beat to catch their breath and think about why we're here, I think is an important part of that interview process. If we have time, which we almost never do, I like to ask people about their background, their personal history, not dive right in. But usually these are, time is precious. As we go through the interview, one of the techniques that I like to use is to reframe the question in such a way that reminds the person who the audience is. So, for instance, I would say, Chris, if you were talking to a student about this research that you've done, how would you phrase it for them so they could understand? Or Dr. Smith, when you're talking to a patient and their family, how do you communicate with them this high-level concept? That helps remind them who we're talking to, which is always important. But it also helps me understand what's the proper language to use when I'm writing. I tell them the way I explain my role is that I say that I'm a translator. So I work between the expert with a lot of expertise and anybody who might read the article with maybe no education. And so my role is to help both of those people communicate. So my big trick here is it comes at the end of the interview. I always ask people at the end of the interview about their motivation for doing their work. How did you get involved in this line of work, and what keeps you coming back every day? Because sometimes that's where the story is. Even though you've just talked for an hour or half an hour about all the minutia, sometimes the story is, why do you personally care about this? Why does this matter to you? That motivation can be really, really impactful. And then the last thing I do is I say thank you, and I mean it.
Yeah.
It's a really overused word these days, but I always try to bring gratitude, and I try to express that. I don't use the word gratitude, but I say thank you, because I thank these people for their time, which is literally valuable.
Yeah.
We're healthcare folks, and educators, and so is their story. And so to share that story with me, to share that story with our audience, really is a gift. And so helping them understand that it's valuable and that we know that it's valuable is a great way, I think, to close off.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Quick break to tell you about my new book that I co-authored with Rob Clark called The Attention Gap: Why Great Schools Stay Invisible and How to Fix It. We wrote it for higher ed marketers, enrollment leaders, and anyone trying to reach students in today's noisy, scroll-happy world. It's built from 130 plus episodes and conversations with higher ed leaders from this show, plus Rob's experience growing that tall family to over 4 billion views online. We unpack why the old marketing playbook isn't working any longer and what you can do about it instead to fix that. If your team is serious about closing the gap between great programs and real visibility online, this book is for you. Grab your copy of The Attention Gap today on Amazon. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah, in a fast-paced environment, they're probably not going to get a lot of those thank yous and be taken for granted, even though they shouldn't be. Anybody really who gives time should be thanked for that. And I also like, when you give them a beat, like you said, to get their bearings again. Who knows what they just encountered before they jumped into that call. And that's where the empathy comes into play, right? Where you just literally break the ice, because you may be, and I see this all the time in my interviews, people are showing up to this show and they're a little bit nervous or a little bit tense because they don't want to say the wrong thing and they want to be exposed because everybody wants to bring their best. But just to ease them into a conversation and make it a natural flow, you can just see the walls come down throughout the interview, and at the end of the interview, it's just a regular conversation, like you described earlier. So it takes practice and a willingness to really not just go through the motion, ask the questions, but to see that person who's in front of you for who they are and who they're trying to help and what their why is.
It's so true. It's so true, Chris. Our business is about relationships and connecting. Mm-hmm. Figuring out how to connect through a computer screen, through the written word, through a brief video is so much easier when you're able to do it with the person you're talking to.
Yeah, and I've come across it time and again where I stopped the recording, and then people opening up to me and telling me things they haven't had a chance to tell somebody else, but because I built that trust over the 30 minutes or so, they could just get a release. At least, then you serve as almost like a counselor for a couple of minutes, and you give them some time to just decompress. They don't know you. They'll probably never see you again. It doesn't matter. You didn't record it. You move on. They'll move on, but you did something good for them.
Yeah, it's so true. One more quick practical tip for everybody. When you're doing the interview, silence is golden. So after they stop talking, don't jump in with your next question right away. Give it 3 seconds, give it 5 seconds. Sometimes that's when the best bit comes out.
That is so true. That is so true. All right, so this is all great advice, Chris. So you work across healthcare and higher education, two industries that seem very different on the surface, but share many of the same human challenges around trust, emotion, and communication. What similarities have you noticed between the two, and how does that shape the content and the stories that resonate most with the audiences?
Yeah, it's really so true, Chris. And this is one of the big things that I've learned and put together working for StayMates and working in these two fields. And I have a lot of background in health and higher ed, decades. And I can tell you that I've learned that there are a lot of overlap. The Venn diagram on these two industries is huge. They're both really complex systems that people need help understanding, right? They're crucial to people's lives. They're expensive and they're really confusing. It's so easy to get turned around trying to register for classes or get a referral for an appointment. They both have really high barriers to entry, right? Do you have my major? Do you take my insurance? Can I get in? Can I afford it? These are all huge questions that everybody has when they're starting to interface with these industries. But that's the tip of the iceberg, right? Doctors and faculty members, very similar type of folks. Highly educated, very conscientiously focused, mission-driven people, not always the best communicators. Healthcare and education, totally crucial for our society, for our culture, for our world. I'm the kind of person who doesn't feel good if what I'm doing doesn't make a difference.
Mm.
Being able to work with these folks who are out there every day making a difference is really impactful for me. And both of these industries really can get a bad reputation, and depending who you're listening to, healthcare and higher education can really be boogeymen. And so I think it's really great to be able to work to counter that and to tell some of the stories about what's going on in these industries, the real people and the real things and the real differences that they're making. So what are the stories that resonate, and kinds of stories that resonate in both? Stories that pull back the curtain and help people understand how the institution or the system is really working for them and on their behalf, and how they can interface with it. Explaining research and why it should matter to somebody. Talking about new initiatives and opportunities that the institution may be launching. Tell it the right way, tell the story, don't just put the press release out. Any stories of real human impact, things that make this experience real and help people picture themselves there, are gonna connect across almost any industry, but especially these two.
Yeah. Where do you think that negative narrative's coming from?
Oh, how much time do you have? I think a lot of it is it starts with those barriers that we talked about, with these big systems that can feel exclusionary, and they're expensive, so that creates a social stratification.
Yeah.
And then I think the best way I can put it is I think that there are elements in our society who have found these industries useful as wedges to keep people apart and to sow distrust. And I think that part of our job, politics aside, is to help shed a light on the really good work that's going on.
Absolutely. Build that human connection.
Yeah.
In the end of the day, you sit across from each other at a table and not listening to the news, you see that we have a lot more in common than we don't.
That's absolutely right.
Obviously, there's a lot of conversation about AI right now in content marketing. How do you personally use AI in your workflow, and where do you think human curiosity and editorial judgment still matters the most?
I do use AI, but I use it carefully. And I'll tell you why. There are so many real and valid concerns about AI: ethics, privacy, environmental, economic. I mean, it's the topic of our time. I imagine we're all talking about this in every conversation. But in our business, we'd be really foolish if we didn't figure out how we could use this tool to help us better do our work. In this. So that human judgment and editorial experience are totally critical throughout the process. I don't misunderstand me, anyone. AI will not be doing this job, not as long as I'm around, because you can't. I've tried, and it doesn't work. So how do I actually use it though? I use it for research, right? I have to learn a lot about a lot of different things very quickly. Sometimes I'm interviewing 2 or 3 doctors or faculty members in a day about wildly different subjects. So AI is helpful for trying to learn what I need to know about those quickly. Summaries are really great. It's good at identifying gaps. So if I'm about to interview somebody and I feel like I need another question or 2, or maybe I'm worried I'm missing something, I feed my questions into AI and say, what am I not thinking of here that the audience might be? And then once I get all that work, all those pieces together, it can be helpful in outlining a story too. What's the gap that I'm missing here? What information do I have that I'm not here? It can be helpful. I'll tell you a little quick story though about asking interview questions. I'm keeping score, because there are some questions that I write, and then some questions I let the AI help me with. So every time a faculty member or a doctor says, "Oh, that's a good question," I make a little tick, and I'm outperforming the AI by about 2 to 1 at this point, which I feel really good about. But the AI it scores points. It's not nothing. They don't say that's a stupid question. So I do think it is useful, but you have to be really careful when you're writing content. You can't let the AI do it. Google tells us with every update that SEO still turns on content written for humans by humans. And so ultimately, that's what we're doing, right? Is we're trying to drive traffic to the site. We're trying to have search engine success. We're trying to have AI search success. And that comes from human content. That comes from that editorial discretion. That comes from that experience about knowing, what is the story. I also, and I'm sure your audience is aware of this, when you read AI content, you know it. We don't always know why it sounds like AI or feels like AI, but we can tell that it is. And I can't say this strongly enough. When you're in higher ed, that audience has no tolerance for AI, right? The research tells us this. The anecdotes tell us this. They can smell it a mile away, and they really, really don't like it. So you've got to be extremely careful in any student-facing content to make sure that it does not smell like AI. Anecdotally, I have a 20-year-old son who's a sophomore now, and he and his friends, the minute they think something is AI, forget it. They're changing the channel, they're putting down their phone, they're scrolling away. I would go even further to say, not that they would discount that content, they would discount your entire institution. I don't know what that's going to mean generationally as we progress into the future, but I know now if you're trying to market higher ed, you've got to scrape every instance of AI. Don't write for robots, write for people.
That's right. I saw a report somewhere that the Generation Alpha and Generation Z, they're moving away from smartphones and they get flip phones again. They want to get more simplified, right? Back to the older days where everything wasn't as technologically advanced, and you were constantly bombarded with messaging. And I can see it on LinkedIn too with the AI generated content of people that I follow, and I stopped engaging with it really because I can tell what was spit out by ChatGPT, and they just copied it and pasted it. They didn't even edit it a little bit. It was just copy, paste. And I'm like, if it takes me longer to read your post than it took you to write the post, I'm not going to read it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. No more copy and paste. That's it.
Yes.
You got to rewrite it every time.
Now, there's a budgetary concerns in higher education. We've seen it all over the news. Many higher ed marketers are being asked to produce more content with smaller teams and tighter timelines. What advice would you give someone trying to improve content quality without burning themselves out?
It's tough. There's no way around it. It's tough times. Exactly what you said. As budgets shrink and teams consolidate, we're being asked to do more with less. You got to use your tools, and that includes AI now. You've got to figure out ways to smartly leverage what already works, and so you can keep the quality high. The biggest advice that I give for people isn't new. It's create once, publish everywhere. It's asset remix. It's don't reinvent the wheel every time. Do what works for you. Analyze it, make sure it works, and then keep doing it. Analyze it and make sure it continues to work, and then do it some more. If you need new ideas for how to reuse a blog article or a long form video, you can talk to Staymates. You could talk to AI, get some answers from AI, and then throw half of that away. You'll get some things that are good. Make those long videos into short videos. Make those blog articles into short videos. Repurpose that infographic. It's working smarter, not harder, and not reinventing the wheel. It's figuring out the system that works for you and then constantly being willing to optimize and make that more efficient. Otherwise, it's just impossible to stay ahead of the curve. It feels that way anyway.
Absolutely. Work smarter, not harder. We could close the episode right now, but I have one more question for you. If you could give a higher ed marketer one mindset shift when it comes to storytelling and content strategy, what would that be?
That's a great question, Chris. I think, honestly, for me, it comes back to gratitude. That's made such a difference for me in my work. It can feel like we're making widgets sometimes, and it's like, why are we doing this? But especially when you're lucky enough to work with the kind of folks that we work with. our colleagues and our clients, we're doing work that matters. And we're really lucky. Some people have to work for a living. We get to ask questions and be curious and then tell stories that matter about people who are doing good work. We get to paint the picture about how education changes lives, healthcare saves lives. And all we have to do is tell the story, tell it right. It's a real privilege to get to do that. It's challenging, it's hard, but it's a rare gift, and I try to be really grateful for it as much as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at StayMates, and how people can connect with you after this.
Sure. So my background first is in journalism, and then in higher ed. I worked in higher ed marketing for about 15 years before I came to work at StayMates. And what I do for StayMates is I create and strategize content for our clients in higher ed and healthcare. So that means developing topics, maintaining editorial calendars, interviewing the experts, and then ultimately writing and creating that content that goes out. So, I work with our enrollment colleagues too on a lot of their efforts on opening up the enrollment funnel, getting more applications in, getting them through to matriculation. The bottom line is that we're working to help institutions connect with their audiences and achieve their goals. It's an awful lot of fun. So folks can reach me emails best. It's my name, Christopher.Lott, Lott, at staymates.com, or if you're into brevity, you can also do Chris.Lott, Lott, at staymates.com. Both are good.
Awesome, Chris. Tell me about the story about small Christopher Lott growing up in the 80s and 90s. Did he always want to become a writer?
First I was a reader, and then I realized there wasn't much I was very good at. So yeah, I went through the 90s going to open mics and reading my poetry, and then I got into communication school, realized I was not cut out for TV. That is not my path. And wound up as a creative writing major. So I studied poetry, I studied art history, I studied history, and so I have a Bachelor of Arts in creative writing, and I have not really written a poem since. So I went from there into journalism in my hometown, ran the hometown newspaper for quite a while. Which was an incredible learning environment. If you want to learn how to work hard and you're a writer, go work for a newspaper. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking to hire people, hire newspaper people. Nobody works harder than newspaper people. That's what I say.
Chris, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Now, Chris, the journalist that he is and the interviewer, asked me if I wanted to be interviewed on my show, so I'll give him the mic.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I gotta, if I'm gonna be interviewing, I gotta put on my hat, and then I've gotta find my questions. There we go. Okay. All right. From the top. Let's take the hat off. That's a different show. Chris, I'm really curious about your experience growing up as a kid. What were your passions and interests when you were a young lad in Germany? And here's the question: what did you want to be when you grew up?
It is a good question, and I have to really go back to that. Grew up in Germany, raised by a single mother in the restaurant business. I was behind the bar counter pouring drafts of beers at 11 years old, helping out, washing the dishes. I knew at an early age that I did not want to be in the restaurant business, but that was kind of like the path that I had to take. So my first job was as a chef's apprentice, which I did not like at all. So I quit. The next job, because I needed a job, was as a concrete finisher apprentice, which I worked on construction for 4 years. Still didn't like that. I always wanted to do something that I do now, working in an office. That was the initial dream. Didn't know what that meant, but the way I was raised and the educational track that I took in Germany wouldn't allow me to get into a white collar job. So I was destined to go into blue collar. And after graduating with my vocational degree, I said, I got to get out of Germany and I have to go to the United States, land of opportunity. Maybe, just maybe I can make it happen there and follow my dream of becoming somebody that works in an office. This was the only thing I wanted because I worked hard outside for a long time. So I ended up at Tampa, Florida. I got a job as a data entry clerk and then worked at a mailroom, and this has just took off. My office career, went to school as an adult learner at Hillsborough Community College, and then went to the University of Florida to finally get my dream job as a marketer later in life. And ever since then, yeah, communication was the key, but the way I was raised, it was never really the opportunity wasn't there. So, but eventually I got here, and I really love what I do now.
Sounds like you made your own opportunity.
I did. You have to make your own opportunity as a person. Nobody's going to hand you anything, really. So you got to make it happen for yourself.
You touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious, when you were envisioning coming to the States, trying to get that desk job, how did you pick where you were going to land? The big country, there's a lot of offices out there, a lot of schools.
Yeah, you got to grab the opportunity when it comes to you. I knew somebody who lived in Tampa. I never thought I'd move to Tampa because I love the snow, living in Germany. But then I decided, hey, this is going to be my one shot to come to the United States. So I grabbed it by the horns, stuck around in Tampa for 17 years, met my wife there, had 2 children, and then we moved up to Georgia, where the seasons are a little bit more like in Germany. But yeah, so you got to take the opportunity of a lifetime and a lifetime of the opportunity. And sometimes these opportunities come by and you have just a short window of time to grab it before it's gone forever. So you have to make a quick decision, which I did. It was very difficult, had a lot of homesickness for years, but eventually I got over it, and I'm the better for it.
Well, we're certainly lucky that you did.
Thank you.
This is the question that I ask everybody. How did you get into this line of work? And more importantly, what keeps you coming back every day?
Yeah, so this line of work went after I left Tampa, Florida. I worked in legal for almost a decade in Florida. So when we left Florida to move to Georgia, I thought that I'd just get another law firm job, but that door was closing, which I didn't know it would be. And I fumbled into a job at a tech company in Atlanta whose primary customers are higher education institutions. So the company is called Hand & Hill. They're the makers of Cascade CMS. And I came from a combative environment, legal, to a collaborative environment, higher education. I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, these people are so awesome. I love being here. Everybody wants to help each other out. I knew the power of education, what it's done in my life, and I just wanted to help these institutions communicate the value of a college degree to the people who are still seeking the better life for themselves. So that's why I keep staying around. That's why I have a podcast where I spotlight these marketers who are often unseen and they're just doing their job, but they never get the recognition they deserve. So I try to give a platform to share their stories.
Last question, Chris, and then we'll let you go. If you could give one piece of advice to higher ed marketers, what would that be?
I would say never settle. Never settle for where you are. Things can change in an instant. You never know what the future holds, how the institution's doing in the background. If they need to let you go, you want to make sure that you always set yourself up to create your own success. So never feel like you're safe where you are, but always do a little bit more than is expected of you in order to create the next opportunity for yourself.
Great advice. Thank you, Chris.
You bet. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much for being a part of the show, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. And that's a wrap for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Education Marketing Leader Podcast this week. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with your friends and your network. And if you ever thought about starting your own podcast, now that you listen to one and you got inspired, reach out to me via DM. We'd love to help you launch your own. We'll take care of everything for you, the scripting, the strategy, the editing, distribution. All you have to do is show up, connect with your audience, and build your personal brand. So if you're ready for it, let's chat. And for everybody else, we'll see you next time at the Education Marketing Leader Podcast. Take care, friends.